Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of the Alder Hour, your favorite way to end your working day. Said that 19 times before, never mucked it up before. Anyway, welcome to the show. I'm Matt Alder. I'm the host of Recruiting Future podcast and also the Alder Hour. The Alder Hour is part of the Purple Acorn Network. If you head over to purpleacornnetwork.com, make sure you do that after the show. Don't stop watching. Do it after the show. You can learn more about the other great shows that are on the network. You can also follow Purple Acorn on their LinkedIn page. This episode is also available as a podcast, so make sure you check it out wherever you get your podcasts. So if you are watching the show live, and I sincerely hope you are, just to prove we're live, you can write comments, engage with us, argue with us, and we will try our best to read those out and see what you have to say. And we've got some really interesting content coming up on today's show. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my two amazing co-hosts for this week. And there they are. We had a bit of a preview of the Points and Pints thing there, but that's cool. We'll get onto that in a second. So this is the first time we've all been back together since Transform, I think, isn't it? Am I right in saying that? I think I am. So Justin, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, thanks. Yeah, happy to be back.
Fantastic. And Rona, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Happy that we're all together.
Absolutely. And the return of your pink microphone as well, obviously.
Yes.
Which I haven't got my green one yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So what do you both have for us this week? Rona, what are you talking about?
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about invoicing companies for long interview processes.
Excellent. I love that topic. I'm looking forward to that. Not quite as much as action figures last week, but it's a good kind of alternative. And Justin, what do you have for us?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean when your boss, after 10 years of not doing any performance reviews, all of a sudden starts wanting to implement something. Is there something to be worried about?
Interesting. So let's move straight on to Points and Pints. Not sure we're going to get the intro again. Doesn't matter. There we go. So this week, so if you've not watched the show before, in this section we all have our favorite drink or any drink that we've got to hand, and we discuss the headlines that we've found about HR and recruiting this week. So next week, as everyone else is, I'm going to Unleash. I'm going to be back in the USA. So I've got a USA type beer to celebrate. Had this one before. Again, I'm working my way through the box. Brooklyn Brewery, obviously very famous US beer maker. But I think before we saw that this beer is actually brewed in Sweden and canned in the UK. So you're very international. So let's see if it tastes as good as it did the other week. There we go. Rona, what are you drinking? What are you drinking this week?
I have this mocktail. It's Hayo and it's peach mango, and it's the one that is has nootropics and all of that. So we'll see how this one tastes.
Oh, yeah, excellent. That's good. Yeah, everyone needs to tune in just for our alcohol-free advice. Justin, what do you have there?
I have a mango neutral.
What's that?
My personal cup that no one can touch at home.
Nice. I need a personal cup for this. This is such a nice beer. If you do like alcohol-free beer, I would recommend this one. It actually has a really really nice taste to it. So everyone's got a beer or a drink. That's great. Let's move on to our first headline. Now, really interesting one. So Microsoft HR head gives employees 5 days to leave, a 5-day deadline to ... or leave the company. Bit of a clickbaiting headline there. So basically the story here is that this is Microsoft out of India. And the story is that their head of HR is saying, we're going through this process of performance improvement plans for low performers, and if you do not improve after your performance improvement plan, then you will be fired. However, as an alternative, you can leave right now within 5 days, and we will give you 16 weeks' salary. So, a few things to say about this. First of all, I think it's tech companies finally saying out loud what's been happening for quite some time now, which is this whole idea of actually disguising layoffs as performance issues, and this seems to go quite close to kind of really sort of exposing that this is what that might be. So, my view, I mean, on the one hand, it's still shocking that people are trying to disguise layoffs as performance reviews, and they're saying that quite a bit out loud. And this kind of must be about reducing headcount. Otherwise, why would you ask people to leave before you've improved their performance? That just doesn't make any sense. So, again, sort of quite shocking. I suppose the one thing in their defense is, at least they're offering, a fairly sort of generous exit package by comparison to some other countries. I don't know what the situation is in India for exiting companies, but 16 weeks pay is probably more than you would get certainly in the UK and some countries in Europe. So I think it's a kind of a bit of a expose of what's sort of really going on out there. Justin, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Matt. I think it's, almost great that there's an HR leader out there who is not hiding the fact that this is, in fact, about layoffs, that it isn't about necessarily performance, and taking advantage of those who might not be performing as well as a way of reducing headcount. They're being transparent about it, which is good. And I understand, as an HR practitioner myself, I understand, what they're trying to accomplish and how they're in some ways trying to do it fairly by specifically targeting low performers instead of having high performers worrying about layoffs. So that part is key. If I was one of those employees, I would probably take the severance because the low performers have a target on their back anyway. And so you're either going to get chopped 16 weeks from now, unless, there's some massive improvement, in which case, okay, maybe they have a high performer on their hands here. Or, you could take 4 months to relax and find the next job. So an interesting thing, Matt, but nonetheless, I still found it a little controversial when I was listening to you describe the situation.
Yeah, no, I mean, no doubt about it. I think it is controversial, and it's like I can't see. It's kind of so rigged because I can't see anyone who's got that option of like go on a performance improvement plan and probably get fired or leave now with 16 weeks pay. It just doesn't seem like a kind of an equivalent choice. I mean, Rona, what do you think?
I mean, we've been saying for years, and I know someone who's worked in tech, we've been saying for years, a performance improvement plan doesn't mean you're getting fired. Well, they're never going to trust that again, because it absolutely does mean that, because they're basically telling you that up front. Now, it really depends on the country. I don't remember the severance or how layoffs work in India. It was many years ago when I was doing HR there, but I do know in some countries, for example, Panama, where I'm from, your severance depends on how many years you were working there. So it might be more than 16 weeks. So that's the only thing where it's like, well, what's in it for them with offering this? Because there's always something in it for the company versus the employee. That's the only thing that I thought about. But again, if I were the employee and if it were truly more than what I would get, I would 100% take the severance, because they're already essentially telling you you're not going to stay here either way. Like, we don't care about your performance improving. There's nothing magical that's going to happen. We're just trying to do layoffs.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, some great comments coming in about, that's the thing. It's kind of like recognizing that low performance, and I think people would definitely take that. We definitely take that package, but I just think that we're going to see a lot more of this because I think, particularly in tech companies, AI, whatever people say about it, AI isn't going to take your job, etc., etc., etc. AI is already displacing jobs, and it's going to continue to do that. And I think tech companies are at the kind of almost the sharp edge of that because of some of the things it can do with code and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, unfortunately, I think we can expect a bit more of this, but I think Microsoft India has actually exposed it for what it is, in a way that other companies and countries haven't. Okay, so let's move on to our second headline. So, how should HR handle workplace violence and harassment from customers? It was quite a confused article actually, because the headline says it's all about harassment from customers, but there was a lot in there generally about harassment, and I didn't quite necessarily 100% sort of see the focus in the point. But sticking with the kind of the customer harassment bit, I think it's a really interesting topic, and the line that kind of really stood out for me is that customer hostility is at an all-time high at the moment, which is kind of not surprising, and I suppose there's lots of reasons as to why that might be. Now, I don't know what the situation is in the USA, so I'll be interested to get everyone's sort of perspective on it. But I did find this particularly disturbing, particularly the kind of almost debate about should we train people to be prepared? What kind of happens? Is the company responsible? All that sort of stuff. Because certainly in the UK, and I suspect in the rest of Europe, there are very stringent health and safety regulations about work, which means the employer has a statutory responsibility to protect staff from harm, and also a duty of care for them while they're in the workplace. So they have to provide a safe workplace by law, and that means having things in place to protect employees from, hostile customers who can turn violent and all of those, and all of those kind of things. So, I mean, what's the situation, Jocelyn? What's the situation with this in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that there is more of a shift from the customer is always right mentality from managers to absolutely no way you're going to treat my employee this way. So it's been a shift. We're a little different from the UK, Matt, in the sense that UK generally has more of this like not almost like this feeling of personal responsibility toward their employees, like
Yeah,
as a company.
yeah.
So a little different here. I having worked for a UK company before, I've definitely seen the difference between the two cultures.
Mm,
Uh, it's possible that this might be addressed in the California Workplace Safety and Violence Prevention Plan that employers had to put in place. I haven't gone into the details of it, so I'm not sure. But I've personally seen this happen. I was working for a retailer earlier on in my career, and there was a customer that had grabbed some object from the shelves and went to the cash register and was ready to buy it. And when the cashier rang it up, the amount was maybe $10 more than what this customer said it was on the shelf. And so the customer got really worked up and ended up throwing the object at the cashier's head.
mm,
And so, as an HR professional, you are responsible for conducting these investigations, regardless of whether or not it was a third party. And so that part is really critical because there is that liability that an employer has and the responsibility toward the employee to make sure that they're working in a safe environment.
mm.
I don't think that this is a novel concept whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that it's being promoted more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some interesting stuff in there about, when to call the police and how to de-escalate situations and all those kind of things. Rona, what's your take on this one?
I mean, I agree that as a company, even if it's a third party, you have to protect. And in the scenario that you explained, and a lot of the examples that they had there in the article, I 100% agree. But then there was one scenario, one of the first ones, where they were saying the one with Buffalo Wild Wings, where they fired two servers who complied with a customer's racist request to remove people. And it's like, that's where it gets tricky. And I'm like,
Mm.
is this really an HR thing? I guess it is. I don't know. But it's like, at that point, we're telling people just do what the customer says. How do you train your employees to deal with a situation like that where it's not against the employee, the harassment, but it's just like, I don't want to be seated next to these people, you move them type of thing. Like, how
Mm.
do you empower your servers to be like, no, we're not doing that? Like, they had nothing to, like, they would have lost either way,
Yeah,
is what I think.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like that there is, potentially still kind of a lot of clarification of work and things that sort of need to happen in this area. As I say, in the UK, it's kind of a little bit more kind of cut and dried. There's that kind of statutory responsibility to protect to protect the employee from, or not just from violence, but from other things as well. So, yeah, quite the situation, this one. So let's move on to the situation room. Right, Jocelyn, talk us through this week's situation.
Okay, this one's actually pretty short and sweet. There's an employee whose manager all of a sudden came to them and the whole group of employees and said, "Hey, I want to start implementing performance reviews." He handed out these evaluations on paper that he wanted them to complete, self-evaluations, and the concern that this employee has is, in 10 years, you have never done a performance review with us. So, what's changed? And this employee said it's possible that his friend, who's a consultant, has influenced him in doing something like this. But it's also possible that he's just now recognized that there are people he doesn't want on his team. And so he's trying to use this as an excuse to start documenting their performance to boot them out.
Mm, mm,
Um, and of course, that's going to be a fear anybody has. As soon as I read it, Matt, I really felt like this was an individual who was taking a lesson from a friend of his and wanting to be better at his job and wanting to be better for his employees. Performance reviews are supposed to be great. They're there to correct something, they're there to help you develop, they're there to help you grow in your career. And so it should be seen as something really positive, but I can completely understand when an employee sees this shift in behavior and wonders, hey, what else is going on here?
Yeah, and I think it ties back to what we were talking about with the tech layoff performance plan thing a bit earlier. People can be sort of suspicious for those kind of reasons, particularly when there are headlines like that sort of circulating around. I dived into the comments for this one, but I think there were some interesting kind of views were coming through. And I think overall, I think you're right. I think this was just someone trying to do things better for their employees. But there was a kind of a real split in the comments between people saying this is a great thing. How else are you supposed to measure your performance and get better and all that sort of stuff. And then there was sort of someone talking about, well, actually, we don't need this. We don't need annual performance reviews or regular performance reviews. We get feedback in the moment. And then there was a kind of debate about whether feedback in the moment or actually taking a kind of a broader view of what was going on was better. And then obviously lots of suspicious people thinking everyone was about to be fired. I mean, what's your sort of take on performance reviews generally? Should they be, how regular should they be? What's the difference between that kind of review and just sort of checking in or giving feedback in the moment? What's your take on that?
Well, if it was me personally, if I have my company, right? So this is my company. I'm all about the continuous feedback loop. I don't think I need to sit down with my team and go through formal performance reviews. The only time I might do that is when we're doing pay increases. When we're working on career development, that's not necessarily a performance review, that's a development plan, right? However, when it doesn't suit your culture, that's not going to be the right fit. So, for example, I worked at an organization, we had a very influential head of engineering. And when I introduced the concept of continuous feedback, I think we did biannual reviews after doing a survey with employees. He dug his heels in and said, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this once year review. I'm not documenting this continuous feedback stuff. It's too much work for me. And we couldn't implement it because unfortunately it just didn't fit in that culture. The culture as it existed then. So I do think it's really important before an HR practitioner tries to implement a new performance review process that might be more popular today, for example, to really consider, is this a good fit for the leadership team? Am I going to get buy-in from the leadership team by implementing something like this? Because the last thing you want to do is implement something new and then it just fall flat and it's just a bad reputation for HR.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned there about pay reviews and that sort of stuff. My experience of this has been really interesting because I've worked for companies where HR have been absolutely adamant that performance reviews have nothing to do with pay, and pay is a completely separate thing, and decided on what the company policy is or all that sort of stuff. And I've also worked for companies and know people who work for companies where performance reviews are intrinsically sort of tied to tied to pay and pay rises and that kind of stuff. What's the kind of best practice here? What do you think about either of those kind of sort of viewpoints, as it were?
Yeah, I think there still needs to be some type of grading scale for fairness purposes, but also to really have something that people can be working toward. So when implementing continuous feedback at my organization, for example, one thing that is being implemented is surveys, right? We're still kind of doing like a 360 approach and conducting very short surveys. And the surveys are only 5 questions. They're 1 to 5 response in terms of, range. And really what they're there to do is to help us determine, rather than even how you're performing today, it's actually there to help us determine your potential, because that's what we're always striving for culture wise.
Absolutely. Jocelyn, thank you very much for sharing this with us. And we now have a guest. Hi, Benjamin, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Such a pleasure. Welcome from Berlin, or greetings from Berlin.
Oh, fantastic! Well, greetings from Edinburgh. Many countries being represented on the show today. Could you just start by introducing yourself and telling everyone what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ben. I'm the founder and CEO of Alligator, and we're actually a company builder for HR tech. So we are investing and building early HR tech startups, and started in Germany, then moved to Austria, Switzerland, but also now expanding to Europe.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit more about that. How long have you been doing that? Are there any sort of names of companies that people might recognize that you've worked with and sort of scaled?
Yeah, sure. So we're doing actually now for 3 years, and the concept is that we really invest early stage into just ideas somehow. So we really there from day one, sometimes even incorporating companies with the founders. So most of our companies now, like at I would say a late seed or early Series A stage. So it's probably not known widely in the audience yet. But some of them already hit like 1 or 2 million in revenue, to give you some insights. And also, actually, we did our first investment in UK as well into payroll solution. So we're expanding actually right now also to UK and other countries.
Fantastic. And tell us about what's the current sort of state of startups in HR tech? What's the market like? What are the trends? What's sort of going on out there?
Yeah, I mean, not a surprise, but I think AI is like taking over everything. So right now, I would say like, I mean, I'm reviewing, I would say in a week between 10 and 20 pitch decks, I would say roughly. And out of those 20, I would say it's like 95% is something to do with AI. Um, in terms of like what kind of sectors, it's still a lot of recruiting actually. And I mean, I just saw today, or we all saw today, the figures from the UK recruiting companies. So it's a tough business right now, and not only
Yeah.
in the UK. I think it's like a general thing right now. But nevertheless, like I said, I would say like still 60-70% of all startups we screen are still in the recruiting sector, which is quite interesting. But it's definitely AI driven. It's more and more less people are able to do stuff also because of AI. So it's not only for the client, so it's also how they build actually their companies. So
Right.
before sometimes they needed like 10 developers, and right now they can do it with like 5 or 4 because of the usage of AI. So it's also I would say a challenging time on the one hand side, but on the other side, it's also really great time and time for an opportunity, I would say, because you can do stuff as a founder which you can't do before with less money and with less people.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean it's kind of it's a tough time in many ways, but the opportunity here is just amazing to just reset the way that technology works, the way that startups work, the way that HR, the way that recruiting works. So just a huge sort of as you say, just a really really interesting time. What interests me is so obviously you're talking about people can start startups with less people because of AI. Um, what is it that you look for in an AI company? Because is it that it always struck me that a lot of the things that are coming onto the market are things that could be really easily replicated either by kind of existing companies or other companies coming into the space. What is it that makes a startup kind of look different in that kind of environment?
Yeah, 100%, Matt. And I think it's like two things where we take a look at it. It's first is like the team. So the execution is even more important as before. So because like you mentioned, like the barrier of entry or the barrier of copy something it's way lower than before, because a lot of companies they don't even have a lot of own IP. If you see it this way, it's more like they're using existing technology out there
Yeah.
and existing solutions and put it together. But on the other hand, it's also like it's not bad. I think it really comes down like of execution of speed. So I mean, to give you one example, we have or I've done one investment, and there were a team of like 2-3 people, and they bought it on the first clients after like 2 months, and after 6 months they already hit I think over 500 clients. And it was not before possible in a way like this.
Yeah.
So it's speed, I would say, execution speed. But also on the other hand, where we take a look at is like, what is really the AI? Because I mean, we see a lot of pitches, and then if you dig deeper and really ask, like, okay, what is the technology behind? We need to find out, okay, are they just using open AI and make like a business case out of it, which necessarily not be a problem if you have really execution speed.
Yeah. Sure.
But on the other side, it could really cause some issues in the future for those startups, because if you're really relying just on the existing models and they're, for example, increasing prices, like your whole go-to-market strategy or later your strategy can be really crushed. Yeah, because if they just like charge you 20% more, then you really have a problem, because you need to get it through to your client. So next to execution speed, I would say it's like we really take a look, like, do they really have their own IP? Because there are also still startups out there where they develop their own AI. And those kind of like topics are really interesting for us.
No, absolutely. And it's obviously very noisy out there at the moment. There is this seems to happen every few years, particularly when there's sort of a technology shift. There's a bit of an explosion in startups, but also established tech companies are also kind of putting more noise out there in the market and rejigging their products and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite difficult for startups to get traction. How are they getting traction? What's kind of making them sort of break through and get into the awareness of the kind of the HR and TA professionals that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more important is like the way how you sell it and social selling. I mean, what we're doing right now, going live, telling about like solutions, problems. It's one of the keys. We see that I would say like the most successful startups where we invested, which are with a good traction, they're really able to bring over the message in a good way. So I think like building not only a brand about like your product, but also like build a personal brand about yourself is getting more and more important to stand out of the crowd. And there's also still an opportunity, because I see and I meet a lot of founders which brilliant products, but they're not like marketed in a way which they could be. So I think like marketing is definitely separation. And at the end of the day, it's really right now coming back to the topic: does my solution really solve a problem? So I think the time is over of what we saw, or what at least I saw, for example, after COVID, that we saw a lot of like solutions which were like nice to haves, I would say,
Yeah.
but which was not really solving a huge problem. So I think the best performing startups right now, they're not like nice to haves. They're really going deep down into the issues of HR departments. So it's more about like, again, about automation, like what kind of like old processes you can use or you can digitalize with AI. It's about like more complex solutions, more complex scenarios where you can implement AI and use it in this way. So it's really coming down more to the business case, I would say, and not like nice to haves like it was maybe a couple of years before, where the whole HR tech and the whole startup scene actually was quite heated up. So right now it's a bit colder. Saying that, what I'm also seeing is that it's getting better again. So talking about like startups, we see compared to the last year, way more financial rounds. We know way more companies like preparing their next financial round, preparing their IPO. So in terms of like M&A activities, etc. So in these terms, I think 2025 will be way better than last year, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to very much be the case, and what you're saying there about problem solved, I think that's it's such a great point, because I've seen sort of startups in the past who have got a brilliant solution to a problem, and they come to the market, but unfortunately the problem is like number 40 on the list of important problems that the customer has, and it just doesn't ever get the attention it deserves. And it's good when people are sort of addressing those kind of first, second, or third sort of problems on the list, because that always seems to kind of bring traction. Now, am I right in saying that you're one of the judges on the Unleash startup competition?
Yeah, I am. Actually, I'm heading to Vegas, I think on Monday.
Oh, there we are. Yeah, I'm heading to Vegas on Sunday as well. So there we are.
Oh, nice.
Everyone on the show. Everyone on the show this week is
Awesome.
going to Vegas next week. And also it's our I'll mention this again later, but it's our 21st episode. So we're going to celebrate being 21
Oh, okay.
in Vegas next week. So that's good. So tell us a little bit about what do you think the difference is between the sort of the startup market in the US and the startup market in Europe?
I think it's the difference is there's still more money, obviously. So in the US, it's still more money available for startups. It's I think still a market where they're a bit more open-minded for new kind of things. So I think, especially when I take a look at, for example, the German market, they're still a bit more conservative in some terms. So I'm always saying like the Germans sometimes looking for things which couldn't work potentially. Where I think some other countries, and not only the US, also I see other European countries, actually, they're more open and they see more like the positive side in the first instance, and then check like, okay, this is an opportunity. And then maybe you check, okay, what can go wrong? And sometimes in Germany, they say like, okay, what can go wrong? And then afterwards, they take like a view at like, what is the opportunity? So I think it's still a bit more risk taking. It's more money. On the other hand, you know what? And it's now my third time actually at Unleash in Vegas as a judge. And I remember the first time I was there, I was thinking like, okay, let's take a look. Like, is it a total different to what I see in like the European market, the startups there? And the answer it isn't really. And also, what was a positive surprise for myself was like when I talked to my judges, colleagues, and I'm not like an HR person, so I'm investing into HR tech startups, and I'm quite have a more recruiting background, but I wouldn't consider myself as an HR expert. I'm more like a recruiter when it comes to this point. And when I was talking like to huge like corporations and CHOs from them, they said like they have similar things on the table than in Europe. So it's not only about like new technologies, also about like compliance. It's also about like, for example, what is the AI doing? Yeah. So if I'm implementing an AI in recruiting, so what does it really mean? And also on the other hand, they have challenges in some ways, which we don't have, for example, in this kind of area in Europe. Because if you make, for example, a mistake in hiring in the US, and as an employee, you can say like, okay, this is done by AI, and you've not done it in a correct way. It can be really, really costly for the company in the States. Way more, it could have a way bigger impact than, for example, in Europe. So I think it's the difference is also in the topics are not really different. I think just as a startup founder, it's I think it's still obviously money. And obviously the market size, because when you start in the US, you already have like obviously a really huge market. Saying this, I'm seeing also more and more startups in Europe, obviously expanding not only in the US but also within Europe or within Asia or other countries. So it's quite an exciting time, I would say.
Fantastic. And I suppose just as a final question, what's your where are we going with all of this? What's your kind of vision about what HR recruiting might look like in a few years time? I mean, I'm guessing you must have one if you're kind of finding startups and investing in them and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like where is this all taking us?
Yeah, I mean, overall, and this is a topic I'm talking about regularly, is like I think HR should be seen as a profit center, and HR must think as a profit center. And if we're getting to this way, a lot of things will come automatically. So we don't need to do like normal work, which can be done by AI, and redundant work can be done by AI and technology. And I think this will happen. So there will be taking over more tasks as currently. Saying that, I think it gives also HR an opportunity really to get back to why you join HR, to work with people. So, I mean, you're working in recruiting, and often when I talk to, or when I did in my former job as a recruiter, where I worked for a huge British recruiting company, and I was talking to clients, and you were talking to recruiters, for example, at clients. You ask them like, how do you like your job, etc. And they say like, yeah, you know what? I like to interview people. I like to work with people. I like to develop people. But I didn't find a lot of people who said like, yeah, I like to like copy paste messages on LinkedIn and change the name, But this was like for years. I mean, let's be honest, this was reality a lot of times. I mean, it's not like this, but you know what I mean. So I think like those like boring tasks, redundant tasks will go away, and and AI will take over in a better way, and that's a good thing. And on the other side, and that's something what I really see, and I think this is the direction HR should go. It's really more about like, first of all, taking care of people, so also have time for the people again. Because I met so many HR managers, and they say like, I spend so much hours on recruiting, but normally I'm here for like developing people, for finding new spaces, So this is one thing which will definitely happen, I guess. So more seeing as a cost center. As a profit center, getting away from this cost center thinking, and really be sitting also at the C-level table. I'm always saying, because and that's something only happening when HR also can really make sure that they show their benefit. Because what I'm often see is that they're not yet data driven enough, that they're not yet figure driven enough. But if you really can say, hey, with this initiative, which costs whatever, $20,000, but we generate like 100,000 for your company, then it's a no-brainer. And I think then also there should be more CHROs really, so really C-level HR people sitting at the table. Because at the end of the day, you always need HR. When it's going great, the CEO comes to HR and say like, hey, we need to hire people. Yeah, we need to get more people on board. When it's going not so well, you go to HR like, yeah, we need to get rid of people. So it's like either way, it's like you need HR, and to give them more time and freedom really to work with people. And on the other side, I think there will be more and more getting into a role more also of a product owner somehow, to like translate the requirements of the business, maybe to an AI later, maybe to write the right prompts, maybe to choose the right software, etc. So it will be more into a role of like, on the one hand side, I think working more with people, and on the other side, really going into more a direction of translator to technology, and also like to more a product owner, let's say, of those HR tech solutions which you implement in your corporation.
We do indeed live in very interesting times. Ben, thank you very much for talking to us. And I'll hopefully see you in Vegas next week.
See you in Vegas. Thank you so much. It was a
Excellent.
pleasure.
So let's move on to trending or ending. Hey, Rona, how you doing?
I am doing great.
Right. So can you beat last week's action figures?
I don't know if I can
They have
beat
us
it,
this week.
but I know I'm excited about talking about this one. So it was also on Reddit, and there was a candidate who went through 7 interviews, 2 assessments, made it all the way to the final step. Like the CEO was already talking about checking references, making an offer. They were basically rolling out the welcome mat. And then out of nowhere, they got rejected. And the reason was because they were self employed, which, by the way, they had disclosed in the very first interview. So naturally, they did what I honestly wish more candidates would do. They sent the company an invoice for their time. And the company actually paid it. They sent it to the CEO, and the CEO paid it same day. And honestly, if companies want to treat interviews like free consulting gigs, they shouldn't be surprised when candidates start treating them like unpaid invoices, right? They clarified further in the comments because I was like, I want to read the comments on this one. And yes, there was the people complaining about like, oh, interviews are too long and all of that. But they clarified further in the comments that the reason why them being self-employed was a problem towards the end was because one of the board members had an issue in the past with another self-employed candidate they had hired. I know, it's like, exactly. Anyone in TA has likely run into situations like this. That's when you should like really educate your stakeholders on the implications. But we all know that sometimes, especially when it's a board member, this is a battle that we usually lose. So I love that this candidate stood up for themselves and sent that invoice. Look, I'm not saying that companies, that like people getting invoices after interviews is trending. But if companies keep running candidates through 7 rounds, asking for deliverables, dragging them across weeks or months of process without offering any real like respect or transparency in return, people are going to start sending invoices. And honestly, that's a good thing. Because if you're going to treat candidates like vendors, then don't be shocked when they start acting like vendors. Time, like candidates' time is valuable, right? Deliverables deserve payment, time deserves respect. And I think the longer companies drag this mess that we're in out, because it's now normal. Like people expect these long interview processes, even though everyone complains about them. The more these companies are telling on themselves, not just about their hiring process, but about what it's actually like to work there. So, is invoicing after interviews trending? Not yet. But at this rate, I hope it might need to be. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I would really hope that it's trending. I think there's 2 things here. I think that there is the kind of just exposure of some very dodgy recruiting processes. The question for me is, do you really have to interview this person 7 times to find out whether they're going to be a good fit for your organization, and then you reject them on the thing they told you in the first interview? Which is, so I think that there's something in there about poor recruitment processes, badly designed recruiting processes, and also it probably tells you a lot about a lot of interviews in terms of not giving you the kind of information that you need. So I think that's the first thing, kind of exposing, making companies think about their recruiting process and what's the most efficient way for them and the candidate to kind of get the stuff they need to make a decision. And it's, this isn't just inefficient for the candidate, it's inefficient for the company as well, because someone has the amount of time that hiring managers or whoever has been to all those seven interviews, and presumably there was probably more than one candidate, so that's a lot of interviewing time for a company to be spending. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is I've seen a lot of issues in the past in forums and things like that, particularly with creative jobs and marketing jobs, where people are effectively being used as freelancers. It's like, oh, give us a critique our website, or give us a product suggestion, or write a pitch for this kind of thing. And they've not got the job, and then they found that their work has been used, commercially, and that is just disgusting. And I think that the concept of, if you're asking people to do that, then you have to pay them. If you're, if you want to, and it could be a fantastic win-win. It could be that they get to kind of show that how good they are, and also earn some money for their ideas, and the company gets some good ideas. So it's not necessarily a negative thing if it's transparent and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's just got a second point. And then the third point I would make is the kind of like work sampling, seeing how someone works is. I've seen lots of research that says that is the best way, or one of the best ways, to determine whether they're going to be a good fit for the a good fit for the job. And so there's a bit of me that says maybe companies should sort of dive into this. I mean, I interviewed the CEO of a UK business on the podcast last year, who is a smaller business. I think he had about sort of 200 or 300 people working for him, so this was kind of manageable for them. But what they do in their recruitment process is they invite kind of like final candidates in to work with them for a whole day, to spend a whole day, meeting people, going to meetings, doing all that kind of stuff, and they paid them for that day. It was like, you're coming to work for us for a day, we're going to pay you. And his results from that were phenomenal in terms of retention, performance, candidate experience, all those kind of things. So I think there's also an angle here that says, again, dive deeper into it. If people are fairly compensated for doing that, then they should do it. And I suppose the problem, I'm giving you lots of things to come back to me on here, but I think the problem is always, where is that line? What is an unreasonable? Because I think that most people would accept that if they're going for a job at an organization, they're going to have to put some time in to demonstrate that they want to work for that organization, and also to try and find out whether it's the right fit for them and they're the right fit for that organization. And that inevitably is going to take up time. So where is the dividing line between what's reasonable and what's unreasonable? And with things like people developing IP for companies and companies not paying for it, that's a really clear-cut thing. And making you work at the company for a day, clear-cut thing. But 3 interviews, 4 interviews, 2 interviews, what do you think?
I always think it depends, and I hate that that's my answer, but it depends, because it depends on the role, it depends on the team, it depends on so many things. It has to be a reasonable conversation, and it has to be something where everyone's on the same page since the beginning of how long it's going to take. I think the issue here for this candidate specifically wasn't so much the 7 interviews, which, by the way, like Sharon is saying, it is ridiculous. We do not need 7 rounds of interviews. Like, there's not a single role. I think the issue here is, why is a board member part of the decision process to hire someone who's clearly not a C-level role, right? I think that was really the bigger issue, because everyone was on board. Even the CEO wanted to hire this person, and then the board member. So it's like, why weren't these conversations had at the beginning? As far as where to draw the line and how many interviews are the right interviews, like I said, it depends on so many factors. One thing that I'm always very strict on when I work with companies is, if someone's doing a project, we're paying them. And it doesn't have to be a ton of money. Like, I've had people whose who have done work, and we've paid them like $150 for the project, and that's nowhere near even what their hourly rate would be. But just the fact that we offered that we were like, okay, this is for your, we're like acknowledging that you're spending time on this process and you're doing work. So yes, we will pay you. Same thing. I've worked at places where we did the whole work for a day, and it's not the regular rate. Like, I remember doing it, working for a day somewhere for $20 an hour. That's nowhere
Mm.
near my rate. But just the fact that it's like, okay, I'm going to get to be there. I'm going to get to see things. Yeah, I don't expect my full rate for a day when we're just like testing each other. I think that that's really what, if you lay these things out early, you tell everyone's on the same page about how many steps, there's a reason for each step. Because it's not just 7 interviews because you have to talk to 7 people. It's like, do we really need to talk to these 7 people? Is this, like someone said in the comments there, it's like, is this a Supreme Court type of thing where like the 9 justices have to be in agreement and then the president has to? It's like, guys, it's just a role, and who knows what type of role this was. So as
Mm.
long as everyone's on the same page, as long as it makes sense, and as long as you know going into who are the decision makers, and this is talking to the TA people, you should never be surprised or like never be blocked by a board member or something like that, because ideally you should have known since the beginning that the board member was going to have a say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a excuse me. I think there's a couple of points there. Yeah, that whole thing about less than the hourly rate and all that sort of stuff. But it's recognizing that someone's time is valuable. I think that's the key thing here. It's saying that we recognize you're a professional. We recognize that your time is your time is valuable, and we appreciate that. And I think that for many people, that's kind of all that they want. Coming back to the board member thing, I think that it's a kind of a situation that, as you say, all recruiters will be familiar with, but it's also something that is probably particularly common in medium-sized, smaller organizations, which make up the majority of the workplaces in the world. And it's kind of the age-old problem that I think we have in recruiting, is that everyone who is in the workforce has been through a recruitment process, and everyone thinks they know about recruiting. And I don't think there's not many other kind of departments or roles or things in an organization where that's the case. So everyone has an opinion, and sometimes you just get these kind of entrenched, biased nonsenses that just kind of sort of just kind of drive that, and they probably find that very difficult to challenge because it's a board member and all those kind of things. But I think it's it is one of the issues that recruiting has, this kind of this cultural norm of this is how we recruit, we've always done 7 interviews and all that sort of stuff. And a great point just coming through from the comments there about Google having multiple interviews, but doing lots of research about how that kind of worked. I mean, interestingly, right back sort of 10 years ago at the start of my podcast, I was fortunate enough to manage to somehow get an interview with the CHRO of Google, because he had a book out at the time. And we actually talked about this, and they talked about the amount of kind of research they'd done in terms of maximum number of interviews. And after a certain point, they couldn't actually find out anything else about that person. So, I think that's kind of another aspect to it as well. But yeah, the cultural norms and the beliefs around recruiting are the perennial thorn in the side for us, aren't they?
And I always like to say, and I don't know, I've thought about this a lot. Maybe it's because I don't come from recruiting. I started in tech and in operations, and I was always a profit center. So I was always used to like coming from that power, from that knowledge when I'm talking to other people, kind of like what you were just having the conversation with Ben. But I always tell any recruiters I work with in any companies, it's like, you're the expert in hiring. Yes, everyone thinks they know how to hire, but I go into these conversations and I like standing your power, like come from that. You're the subject matter expert. You know how to hire. There's absolutely no reason, like, okay, we want to have 7 interviews, because I've had people tell me things like that. What does each one of these interviews teach you about the person that this other interview didn't? you ask that simple question, they can't answer it, you're down to 4 interviews, you're down to 3 interviews. Like, simple. But if we're just with this mentality of like, oh, we have to make everyone happy, everyone knows, blah, blah, this is how we've always done it. And we're like the order takers because we're just a cost center, blah, blah. That's where it goes wrong. And that's where now candidates don't understand all the behind the scenes. Like, I know when I'm seeing this that most likely the recruiter was not on board with this, but were they really? Because they let it happen for not having these conversations early on.
Absolutely, and it's a whole new kind of topic. It's a whole new show. We have a whole show talking about this. Maybe we should in the future. But we are running out of time for this evening. So Rona, pleasure as always. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. And I will see you in Vegas.
Yeah, see you in Vegas.
Awesome. So there we are, the end of another show. Thank you very much for joining us. Lots and lots of other fantastic shows on the Purple Acorn Network. HR Morning Show, My First Job, From the Desk, From X to Z, some great stuff. So check out their LinkedIn page and also the website, purpleacornnetwork.com. And you can find out about everything that is going on over there. If you want to tap into my longer form interviews, you can go to Recruiting Future, wherever you get your podcasts. And also, you can find all the Purple Acorn shows there as podcasts as well. So particularly if you're looking to be traveling in the next few days or the next week or so, listening to podcasts on a plane is a highly recommended activity. So make sure there are podcasts because there's some great content there. We will be back next week for our 21st show. I'm going to be in Vegas. I'm not sure everyone else is going to be there by then. However, we will all be at Unleash as well if you want to come and say hello and talk to us. So thank you very much for joining us. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.